Hi.
Hey.
Did you get some counter?
Like briefly after, like a couple days, and I don't know. I'm still fighting some nasty congestion like a week later.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it's not the worst, but oops. I think the meeting doc got messed up.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, I tried to copy and paste and just create a placeholder for today, and then I don't know. I have difficulties with Google Docs. It's the UI is just different enough that I lose certain buttons. Clear formatting that would be helpful. Girl 16.
For the KineNet thing, we should use the opportunity to this new parameter to the port map plugin.
What parameters?
One for port map, you can use the Kubernetes mask chain. I sent a pull request just 1 hour ago.
Okay.
I've spent all the weekend trying to find why the IPv6 jobs are flaky, but I don't have any clue.
It's different. It's different underlying CI. The test cases may be flakier. If you're expecting the new Debian stuff to fix things, we need to update the KineNet image. There's like a whole spate of things that could be. It's going to be difficult to pin down.
So the KineNet the image is using the okay.
Though I'm not inclined to merge any of this stuff until we fix the KineNet image missing and just cut a tiny release that is just those straightforward, simple fixes, because we also had since the last release, we've just had a handful of things that fix some user issues, like the V1 Alpha 4 config had slightly more restrictive, like defaulting and parsing. We've relaxed that. If we can fix the air gap thing as well, we should cut a little release with those, and then move on to like upgrading KindNet D and whatnot.
Yeah, there is no rush in updating KindNet. I don't think that's the problem. The only thing is,
I do think we should do it very soon, but for like, but not for the little like patch release that just solves a couple little bugs.
I found one problem with etcd, but it wasn't too admin. The API server was using IPv4 to go to etcd. And there was a lot of weird errors in the API server with endpoints. I don't know what's doing this.
Okay. So I'm not sure what to do about build node image. I haven't yet tried to build Kubernetes from Windows, and that itself seems like an adventure.
Yeah, I started down that path, but the crux of the problem there is like, although I can get Golang and some of that stuff working and it just handles some of the paths, we still have bash scripts that are calling out to Docker for the build image. And I don't see any good trackable interop there without basically like completely blowing up those build scripts. And so I think, based on what we showed at the session, I think it's reasonable to say, you know, if you want to use Kind for like a local cluster to like test an app, that makes sense. But if you want to build your own custom images, we recommend using Docker for Windows or WSL2, because then you're using the Linux build scripts with no modifications.
Yeah, just like the Kubernetes' upstream like build system is very bash heavy. Even if you use the Bazel build, you're still going to need pretty much a full typical like Ubuntu-ish user space.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about doing to mitigate this was I could put in something where when we check the command line flags, if we see build and GoOS as Windows, then I could just point them back to something on our doc site saying, hey, if you want to build node binaries, read this.
Yeah, I have in my bucket of prototypes, I have one more generally that is a pattern I want to enable with failure modes. Like this looks like, oh, I want like Clippy and Kind, like, oh, it looks
Mhm.
like you're trying to build on Windows and it didn't work. You should see the docs. Yeah, I think that's a good pattern. The other thing I was thinking about is if we modify how the node image build works a bit, we can still support. There's probably a class of user that just wants particular versions. So we could support like using the tarballs or something, but I think even there, the better answer is to just like figure out our strategy for like pre-publishing images of all the things.
Mhm.
So that you don't need to build for that class of user. And for the class that's like, I want to develop Kubernetes, I think we're going to tell you should probably use Linux if you can. Mac will work, but given the odds that you're probably on a MacBook, it's still not going to be as good of an experience as if you can like, get a beefier Linux box. and that is recommended if you can.
So the images that are missing today are, so I guess we've got the node image and then a couple things like KindNet that need to match, right? 'Cause-
uh, ish, yeah. Well, sorry, what, like, what's the?
yeah, I don't have the list of images in front of me. So what images would need to be built for all the releases people would use? Is this like the kind node image?
Oh, no. So KindNet is cross Kubernetes version, but for the kind node image, that needs to have a Kubernetes build. Actually, building it isn't that hard. The question is stuff like, how are we going to handle knowing if it works with your kind version?
Mhm.
Like how do we schedule these? Because like ideally we want to effectively do something like, I don't know, a new Kubernetes releases out and then we auto trigger a kind build. But doing
Yeah.
that like sanely and securely is going to be a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we can probably follow the pattern that the project has been doing with the GCB stuff, where like Prow is in the mix, but it's on the trusted cluster, and all it's doing is scheduling a cloud build somewhere else, and the actual like Docker image push credentials are there, so that we don't have our sketchy build running in the trusted cluster, but the credentials are there transitively,
Mhm.
because we don't want like the kindest Docker Hub credentials in like the normal Prow cluster. And then now that we have rerun is a thing that at least I can do as a Prow admin, if we're triggering off of like a Kubernetes tag, it'll be okay when it fails. We can just like reschedule it by like, I just go click a button on Prow's page, and that wouldn't be the worst. But there's also like, do we want to backfill? And none of that solves the problem that like we're probably not 100% done with breaking changes to the node
Mhm.
image versus the command line. There's still a few things that might need to change there, and communicating that is hard, I think. We could try to do something where like we list images and then we do our own discovery process to like figure out, oh, this image has this metadata, so we know it only works for this version. But that is a little bit magical and confusing.
Mhm.
I think the pattern I like the most is we just get to a point where we're not breaking things and then we just push images.
Mhm.
Maybe even switch registries at that point. Um, but I don't know. There's probably some sane middle ground there. Like maybe we encode a kind version more or less in the image tag, and then we do a list on the registry and like only include ones with that tag, or maybe we publish them to like different sub registries, like kindness/node1,
Mhm.
kindness/node2, kindness/node3. But I don't know. I'm not attached to any of those yet. And I also am not super excited at the idea of saying that like Kind has built out of the box, you can run all of these unless we're actually ready to be spending time supporting that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't
Right
think,
now, the ones we're, sorry, I was just going to say right now, the ones that we're publishing, we know work because they're the versions that we've been running in CI except 111. And that one, I hope people understand, is best effort because that's not even supported upstream.
yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And I mean, right now I don't see Kind's charter as necessarily, being a one-for-one replacement for Minikube or something that's supported in like Docker for Windows Enterprise or something like that. I mean, if users want it to be, maybe I think that's an eventual goal, but I mean, that's just my view of it. Feel free to disagree, but it's like, I feel like at least doing the first thing I wanted to do for the first use case to at least help people steer people back onto a path to succeed building. And then, because we really are talking about a different use case if we're trying to build up kind of a version compatibility matrix. And, that's something that I'm doing in my other project as part of, with the CAP, the Cluster API Azure team. And, we've got this whole code base called AKS engine that does that. And it's a very non-trivial task.
Yeah, yeah, I agree totally. And I think that like eventually this, like as we hopefully reach a point where like stuff that seems reasonable to test with Kubernetes just works and kind of is relatively stable, it makes sense to put more effort into like it has all the versions available and it can be used more Minikube-ish, but we still have a lot of things to do with like the IPv6 tests are not reliable enough.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Or like
there is
we want to get dual stack, but we don't have it yet.
the dual stack is since that they are going to merge the kubeproxy IP tables. But there was this week more requests about having kind with persistency to the reboot.
Yeah, a lot of people want that. I think it's a good idea to look at, and I want to look at soon, but I still think that falls under the category of like, this is not really our charter. So it can't like take total priority over like,
Yeah, but the thing
testing
is,
Kubernetes needs work.
the solution of adding an IPAM saving state, I don't think that's, I see a lot of problems with that approach.
No, I don't think we want to invent our own IPAM. I think just using a different bridge will be enough. We just need to take a little bit more of a look at how we want to handle that.
No, because the problem is it if the once you reboot, nobody guarantees the container to pick the same IP.
It will if you start them again in the same order on the same bridge.
Well, okay.
Well, but there's also the hosting container that would be set to restart always on reboot, and that one may be a different address initially.
Not if we required people to run a command to like start all the containers again.
Oh, okay, yeah. In that case, you could keep it.
I mean, it's not the best, but we could. There are definitely options there that don't involve like inventing our own IPAM and trying to maintain the state. And I don't know. It's too bad that you can't I don't think you can retroactively label a Docker container. I'd love to be able to start the container and then just add a label to it that says it was started with this IP, and then when you restart, do that, which would be a little bit less brittle, I think, than depending on the start order.
Yeah, well,
but we could just do we could just do I don't know. It needs more looking at. I don't think it is as much as it would make a lot of people really happy, and I definitely want it to happen long term. I don't think it's the priority over testing and stuff. We are not Minikube currently.
okay.
Minikube also has it on their roadmap to serve these use cases. And if they manage to do that well, that that might be fine. I still at the moment am a little bit more interested in fixing the hack on Kubernetes flow. I don't think we're too far out from that more or less being good to go though. But there are a couple possibly big things. I want to look at external cloud provider is something I think we might have to do eventually. Like right now, we're not setting a cloud provider and we're letting like kind of some fallback built-ins happen, but I think we might need a kind cloud provider to like do just the bare minimum there, like go through and set the node IPs, that kind of stuff. I don't think we need it immediately, but it's more of a like there are some signs that it might be something we have to do long term, so it's worth looking into to stabilize. We also, I still want to finish and submit that integrated test command so that people do not need to like run this bash script or figure out how to fiddle with that. You should just be able to run what we're running in pre-submit. And we should be running more tests.
You have that because that's really something that I need.
I have some of it. I'm going to make it a bit better before I send it.
Good, because I was trying to do something because the bash script in my local environment is
Excuse me. Yeah, I was writing that and then I stopped to like work on fixing stuff and then be out. But I'm going to return to that after we get that bug fixed.
And the cloud provider, what do you want to implement? The load balances? Because I don't think storage.
No. There's a cloud provider interface, and so not what you're thinking of. Not implementing a cloud. Kubernetes has a concept of a cloud provider, and you can tell the controllers, "Hey, I'm running this cloud provider," and that is responsible for things like specifying that the nodes have these IPs, because it's expecting that you have it's your integration with the actual cloud. Storage has its own separate integration. Credentials have their own separate integration. Load balancer and ingress have their own separate integration. But the rest of core Kubernetes has an interface for this. So it's a little weird because it doesn't cover storage, it doesn't cover ingress, it doesn't cover load balancer. But once you take out those classes of things, there's still an interface for dealing with cloud, and that's moving towards you run a controller that is the cloud controller manager for your cloud. And right now we're basically in the fallback mode that's like we don't have a cloud controller. And that's where you were running into the issue with like Kubelet owning the node IP. I don't know that we definitely want this, but we should explore it because it's one of those changes that like you have to change how the cluster is provisioned and you need this new image available, and it's one of those like it'll be a compatibility break.
I see.
It's a different mode of operation. Not quite on the level of like if we weren't using Kubatum or something, but like it definitely is different. Cluster bring up different. Yeah, it'll be another thing that needs orchestrating. And we might need to do that. If we were running a like quote unquote real cluster, if we were doing a really good job providing Kubernetes as a service, like, I don't know, let's say the AKS is doing this, I'm sure they're running a like Azure Cloud Controller Manager to do this, or they might be using the entry one for the moment, but they're definitely not using a Cloud Controller Manager. No serious deployment setup is not shipping a Cloud Controller Manager. I don't remember off the top of my head what all it manages. I know what it doesn't manage. But we probably need to explore having one to more completely round out the being a cluster that you can do all the things with.
Okay. And what about the Windows? This work that somebody was doing, adding Windows nodes to kind or something like that.
I'll let Patrick.
Yeah, so, oops, hold on. Hit some hotkey I wasn't aware of in the Google Doc. Okay, I just wanted to add a few points to this. So the experiment that we're looking at is, we're currently at a spot where we can join Windows nodes with kubeadm join. And so we've had two different people trying to basically make a smaller, make a faster test run for Windows, because today what we do is we spin up a couple VMs to run, controller manager, scheduler, all that stuff on Linux, and then a couple VMs that are running Windows that join as nodes. And so the time it takes to provision several VMs, regardless of the cloud, seems to take longer than provisioning one large VM. And so what we're considering doing is using nested virtualization or joining the Windows itself to the kind cluster with a kubeadm join. And I'll need to see what the latest is on this, but the short of it is that with the port forward that's already there, we were able to establish final VXLAN networking, but there was some issue where I think one of the configurations pulled down in a config map had an IP that didn't match the forwarded, basically didn't match the forwarded IP from kind. And so some sort of kubeadm join or either the kubelet registration would fail later on. And so I don't know what the latest is on that.
Yeah, but maybe this work that you were just started then with Ignite and these different providers can help.
I don't think that's related. So there is like there is a kubeadm config map. It might have been that. You can also, when kind joins nodes, we write out a kubeadm config file on that node's disk with things like, join here with these creds and whatnot. And that may help.
But you write that out inside the container, and so it's still using the container local IP, and we need to swap that out with.
Or sorry, so like when we bootstrap a kind node, we
Yeah.
write a config just for that node. Like kind writes one out,
Okay.
and says like, here's all the options I want you to use with kubeadm. And I think that includes the join info, but it might not. Yeah, if not, the config map is a well-known one, so you could probably just like edit that. It's used by kubeadm for upgrade as well.
Yeah, but that's something I'll try to catch up on. But basically, that was the hope, because then someone could basically have a self-hosted cluster and then join the Windows node to it.
Well, since that, I was surprised. I didn't expect that use case for Kai. Well, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely feasible. I just gotta figure out what the last couple workarounds are. But if that works, that means we may be able. This is something that can provision a cluster faster than waiting on Cloud Init on the other nodes, and it would get us closer to being able to make a Windows job PR blocking. Because today our provisioning time is still up in the, I don't know, 10 to 20 minute range to get all the VMs there and joined. And this could knock that down by several minutes.
Okay, I have to drop. It was nice to meet you again. I will try to to catch up later. Bye.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, KubeCon content. I saw CubeAtom earlier and I didn't understand what that meant. Yes, we need to do that as well. And we need to upload I need to upload the slides from my talk. Yeah, we should definitely get. That might be another couple days. I am snowed under from having been out. I have an amazing amount of things to catch up on.
Oh, no
But yeah,
problem.
no, we definitely should be getting that in. I found out we were supposed to have the slides uploaded ahead of time anyhow, so that's a little bit of a goof to avoid next time.
I thought Duffy said that he uploaded them already, but I'll have to check.
I think he might have, but I definitely didn't for the talk with
for the
Antonio.
freedom.
Yeah, for the like deep
Okay.
dive. And we should get that. We should get all of that in the repo. We should get the easy one will be we can add the YouTube videos and stuff to the resources page, but like we'll want to get the actual like workshop materials in too.
Yeah, and luckily that's Markdown, so we could just import that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think it's a huge rush. I'll ping Duffy and see if he was ready to do it. Because I think the main thing we needed to discuss was there was the question of whether or not we wanted to basically keep a dev image up and running for people to use versus just changing the flow to basically say, well, follow the Kubernetes dev guide to get the needed tools installed and then go from there.
I think we want to try to update the flow because we don't have like the like it's more reasonable on the download side now that we're not worried about the conference. And I think it's a better UX. You also probably want an actual full Kubernetes clone on your machine and
yeah. We don't need that cache, that image cache for sure.
I'm not sure about the overall build in. It might be useful. I think it makes things more confusing though. And on most machines, I would expect it to be a better developer experience to just get it working on your host.
Yeah. And so the thing I could do for Windows is there's two paths that I've done. One, I actually have a PR on Duffy's repo, and that was I've just got a Vagrant file that basically sets up a Ubuntu VM with everything I need, and then the flow works fine. And so I think that would be the direction that's most compatible with different Windows versions. Because then you can use Visual Studio Code and you can just leave your source there in the Linux VM and still edit it locally, and that works great. The other one that I do is like the Deus Labs folks, Helm 3 and all that. They actually maintain a dev image that is compatible with the Kubernetes build system. And so if someone did want to bootstrap a build environment using Docker for Windows, that's the one I personally use. And they keep it up to date because they use it to do things like all the Helm builds and stuff like that that are released for those CNCF projects. And so it would probably be I'd lean towards relying on a pre-existing image rather than us trying to maintain our own.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I in general have less strong opinions about how to develop Kubernetes well from Windows. I knew that to be enough of an issue in the past that I just didn't try. but I do think we want to support. So I'm pretty willing to just like totally defer on that. Like I don't know what people are actually using to do Linux stuff these days. There's a lot of options.
Yeah.
I have personally found it easiest to just also boot Linux when I need to develop Linux, but I'm not sure how viable that is for everyone. And I don't know, these days, like WSL or something may actually be more convenient.
Yeah. Well, it takes WSL2 to be viable, and that's still only in Windows Insider releases. And so I think that, my recommendation would be Vagrant, because if they don't have Hyper-V enabled, then it works fine with VirtualBox for free. If they do have Hyper-V enabled, they can use Hyper-V Provider, and then that works great. Um, and that's personally what I do. Um, on my machines that aren't running insiders. Then I use WSL2, but the speed's comparable between them. But then there's no weirdness, like any copy and paste script you have from the docs just works. You SSH to your VM and you're set.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what I did on a Mac as well, just because um, I kept breaking my setups with Brew somehow. And so that's more of a personal problem, nothing with that tool. It's just I haven't worked with that workflow as much on the Mac side.
Yeah, I've done a lot there, but I again think that like if you have the option for Kubernetes specifically, it's just the build part is still so resource intensive that you really want to be like not in a VM, just on the metal with as much like CPU and RAM and disk as you can get. Everything else is like doing your best to make it not painful, but it's still at the end of the day going to be painful because you don't have that much. You don't have that much CPU, you don't have that much RAM, and you're putting things in a VM, and like I don't know. There's like tons of approaches to it, and they all work okay, but they're all kind of not as awesome because of that. Like kind is a pretty smooth flow. If you have the basic tools installed, you just kind of have Docker for Mac and you run it and it works.
Yeah.
But it's slow to build. And it will eat all of your resources. And
What are you saying, like 20 minutes or so?
I haven't timed it in a while. I
Okay.
inevitably just SSH'd another box. The last time I think I did a build on Mac was Barcelona to have demo images there, and it was very slow, like I don't know, at least 10-20 minutes. I think to improve that we would have to significantly change upstream. I think that may actually happen though with projects splitting out of the repo. They're starting to realize that like something like Kubeatom can just be built with like similar to how we build Kind with the Makefile. I was pointing them to that. It's like, yeah, you could just use Go on the host, but you're inevitably going to want to get rid of that because you have problems with someone has the wrong version installed and like, the binaries aren't reproducible and stuff. But the little shell thing that we have that like runs the build in a Go container, it's pretty simple. It's very quick. You're not linking massive binaries. Like if we moved more of the project in that direction, I think we could get it to not be so painful again.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I tried going down the path of using Bazel builds, and very quickly, I think that would run an average laptop out of disk space.
Yeah, so the trick there with Kind, we don't request building everything, which is way more than you would normally build with a make release. So if you do like Kind's build with Bazel on a Linux box, that is the optimum experience currently, I think, with some caveats that, like, for example, you probably want the basil in your path to be basilisk. And on a recent Kubernetes branch, we should point that at like the right version that should just work.
Mhm.
As opposed to like, I don't know, you have the latest installed and we're using some super old one in CI.
Mhm.
But long term, I don't think that's going to work, especially as we fragment the repos. And we won't need it as bad because
Yeah.
you won't need all that caching. The real problem is going to be how do we test this in CI? I still need to catch up on that's a big one we should be looking into. Kubeatom is trying to go out of tree and they're starting to plan this. And I think we should get in the loop there. That's going to affect us quite a bit. And I think we need to be careful with how we version the repos against each other.
Mhm.
That's going to get very messy quickly because we're just like exploding the matrix.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be the trick. If we get the out of tree move good, then we should be able to improve this experience a lot and revisit it. But that's going to need a little while to shake out. Until then, I think it's going to be bad. Building Kubernetes is terrible.
Mhm. I don't know. It's not that bad to me, but I've worked on some.
There are things that are worse for
I've
sure.
worked on some much larger monorepo than this.
I mean, I'm at Google. We're well known for that. But that experience is wildly different because it's also backed by like much better infrastructure.
Mhm.
And like it doesn't have the problem of like I'm a random kid on my laptop. How do I get access to it? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have access to the code either. But for like Kubernetes, you do have access to the code, and I've been that kid, and it was not as bad in the past. We have gotten bigger and we've added more code generation, and it has just become a real pig to build. I think we can drive it in the other direction, but I think we want to see if we can hack that onto the like move out of tree stuff because that's going to shake up the build anyhow. I expect that will actually end the Bazel stuff. I don't think there's going to be enough effort to maintain that when it's like 10 repos, but we'll see.
Mhm.
In the meantime, I'm just trying to like quietly prototype a best practice and kind of like, how could we make building not a pain?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that just the fact that you're not doing the full make release like KubeTest is doing is a great first step.
Yeah, I think it helps, but there's still so much I don't know. I think we have got to make the actual build cheaper. As much as Kind can like just avoid building things it doesn't need, building the things it does need is expensive.
Mhm.
They're also a lot bigger than I'd like. One thing that we get a lot that I've not been trying to take head on is people saying like, "Oh, just use K3s instead." I had a friend reach out the other day that had like discovered how far Kind had come along, seeing it on like Hacker News, and of course, like every comment had been replied to by someone from Rancher. It was like, just use K3s instead. And I've left it alone, but it would be nice if we could get more of these things upstream. We have the like build without cloud providers, which makes it a bit smaller, but there's
Mhm.
like a lot more there. Making Kind cheaper has both of those side effects. Unfortunately, I think almost all of it's going to happen by changing Kubernetes itself, which is a huge time investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of them aren't clear yet how we can remove some of these things. Like it doesn't remove things like credential provider. The E2E binaries may be more interesting to your actual work. Are going to be really, really interesting for everyone long term when we realize that we want to have E2E.test and everyone use it, but like we don't want all the cloud providers in the repo and stuff. It heavily depends on them and is generally a mess. How are people supposed to build that? How are they supposed to test their cloud provider? That is like totally unapproached right now.
Well, and there's conformance tests that rely on having a functional cloud provider, right?
I don't think so. But there are a bunch of but like that binary depends a lot on like the cloud provider interface, and has a number of tests that make assumptions about cloud providers. It even has some tests that really shouldn't be there that are testing specific provisioners realistically.
Yeah.
Like there's some like GC firewalls rules tests, which are basically just testing KubeUp. I don't think anyone has a plan for that yet. And that's going to be a mess for all of the clouds when we're like, oh, I want XYZ test. I don't know what the approach is going to be there yet, but that is another place where like we can't actually make it smaller and get rid of all the cloud providers. That may be a place where we chip in.
Okay.
But it needs a plan first.
Yeah.
The other stuff was more straightforward because there are plans for like removing most of the stuff from Kubernetes itself. And if we push some of those things along, we can reduce the cost a bit. For that one, I'm not sure what we do.
Yeah, so we probably have to catch up more on some of the code organization stuff later. So I don't think I had anything else for today. Hope you get better soon, and
thanks.
And then I'll keep in touch with Duffy and you on the channel to see about what the plan is for getting that content over, because I'd be happy to start moving those build directions in there.
Yeah, that would be really appreciated.
And so I'll drop him a note on Slack and see if he agrees with that approach. And then I can take some of these outstanding code I have and get it where others will find it, which is kind of what my goal is. So.
Yeah, the other thing I'm gonna do there is I'm trying to get involved with the new contributor workshop next go around.
Okay.
The intermediate level is actually got a lot of overlap with what we did.
Oh, good.
They're using Kind and having you like run Kubernetes and stuff that way. And the workshop is oriented towards contributing Kubernetes. I don't think they had as much around like, run it and configure it and whatever. But nominally, it's a Kubernetes contributor workshop that is leveraging it. I found out about that at San Diego. And I've been planning to try to be on the Contributor Summit staff helping anyhow. So I'm hoping for Amsterdam to actually be on that and have a better idea what they're doing. And I think we have a lot of room to collaborate there. And that might be a better spot in the future. It's, not a speaker slot at the main conference, but I think all of the people involved are already going to be speaking as like SIG representatives or something anyhow. So if we can do it during the new contributor workshop, that may be more appropriate in the future anyhow. We'll see.
Yeah, that's at the end of March.
Yeah, I haven't gotten too much on that yet, but I tossed my name out for helping with that, and we'll see how that
Hmm.
goes.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. Um, so I was looking at that 'cause I think the CFP deadline is like this week or something.
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday. Oh gosh.
Thankfully, my understanding is that the SIG sessions, like the maintainer track stuff, is got some loose, unofficial later deadline of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. They do that a little bit differently. For well, basically anything that's considered maintainer track is scheduled a little bit differently. So,
Yeah, and it doesn't. The other thing I like about it is that I was pretty happy doing the workshop because we weren't taking anything, but I do want to let other people speak and stuff. I have not spoken during the main. I've only spoken during the main thing once besides the workshop, but I'm pretty happy with that. I'm planning to just see if we can get another kind deep dive and try to pull in someone else on that,
yeah.
so we can keep rotating in people, and do the contributor summit stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm probably just not doing the CFP this time because it's so soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely encourage others to do it. And then also from the maintainer track ones, they do allow two speakers. And so if there's someone that's contributing, especially if they've got, a new thing they want to talk about, that's another way that they can get an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait and see closer. I think what we've done before is you can just put a placeholder and then switch. But tentatively, my hope for this time, I've gotten permission to steal a bunch more of a colleague's time here, who's been doing a lot of PR review but hasn't sent much code.
Mhm.
I'm hoping by the time we're at KubeCon, they'll have been like writing code, um, and then maybe they'll want to speak,
Yeah.
to rotate in someone new.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone else that's been involved that is likely to go to Amsterdam has spoken on this.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Definitely pulling someone there. Aaron did the same thing with me. I didn't submit the deep dive. I was going to just do the workshop and like mentoring sessions, and it was going to be great. And he just like
Just signed you up.
signed. Yeah, he just signed us
Yeah.
up, and then he was like, "Ah, actually, I'm not going." So like, pulled in Antonio this time.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All
Well,
right. All right.
happy Monday.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're gonna meet again. So happy holidays.
Yeah. You too. And get well soon.
Thanks.
All right. See you. Bye.
Yep.